Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Alec McCutcheon. I'm from UNICOM, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to today's session, which is going to be very, very interactive. It's on the theme of software testing trends in 2022. So obviously, as we're partway through 2022 already, we're going to really be looking ahead over the next 12 months. So I think it's going to be very interesting because we've got four fantastic panelists. I'm really pleased to welcome Colin Deedy from PPS, who is moderating today. Also Vasantha Priya from Digitate, Rajesh Prakasam from TVS Next, and Chetan Arora from NatWest Group. They're all fantastic speakers. We've had the pleasure of hearing them present at our previous conferences, and we're going to have lots of interaction, so please be ready, type your questions in. I'd also like to say a really big thank you to Digitate, who have partnered with us to host and run this session today. So welcome everybody again, thank you for joining, and I will now hand over to Colin. Thank you.
Brilliant, wonderful, thank you very much, Alec. So lovely to speak to everybody, love to see everybody. I'm joined with three other fantastic people, as Alec was saying. I'm joined by Vasantha Priya, Rajesh Prakasam, Chetan Arora. So thank you very much for joining me all. So questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, anything you would like us to cover over the next hour, inside this application, you will find a question box, essentially. Type your question in there, it will appear to us. We can then field those. And of course, the topic is software testing trends of 2022. Although, as Alex said, given that we're 5 months in, we're going to cheat and call it 2022 plus first half of 2023. So let's call it a year. Software testing trends over the next year or so. Now, before we get started with any questions, let's set the scene. Let's go to a few of the panelists. Let's go to all the panelists and let's see what you feel may well be coming up over the next 12 months. And Priya, I'm going to start with you. What do you feel over the next 12 months, software testing trends, what's likely to be good or not so good, and what's going to change?
Okay. Let me start with some, analyst quote itself, because that has a kind of proven, analysis that has been done. The Gartner on their hype cycle had said autonomous testing is going to be something that we need to look out in the next 5 to 10 years. So from that as the cue, I would say my strong belief is that with the kind of technology advancement that we are having, like be it even AI/ML, which has been commonly spoken, or even that is going to be the latest in terms of metaverse, I believe that as soon as a build is deployed, the test should happen automatically. So all the activities within the test phase, including the functional, non-functional, should happen in an integrated way in a DevOps cycle. Like how we currently are looking at a Veracode or a SonarQube, that kind of thing should happen within testing space too. The second, when we look at it from an environment or a data management perspective, because that's another bigger piece within the testing, right? It's just not writing the scenarios or, taking it towards the execution. Managing the environment, monitoring the environment, giving right preferences to the environment, picking up the right integrated data, all this also should or would happen seamlessly with very minimal human intervention. In fact, like how we are putting it in production on the offsite, all the issues can be self-healed. The same concept would come into the testing too. Taking it to the next level of the requirement, right? If you really look at shift left, we have been talking about it for very long. But requirement being tested at the requirement or a planning stage is still a human intervened kind of a task. Is there a mechanism where, a screen is given, a prototype is given, the requirement is there, I'm able to identify something up front is a true shift left, according to me. And there we will definitely see a lot of change coming up. And of course, with all these, I strongly feel people aspect also will change. be it a role, be it in terms of learning what to learn, what not, what to unlearn. All of this will play an important role in the coming year.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very, very interesting. I've got a feeling we're going to be diving back into some of those topics in a bit of depth. Absolutely. Let's go randomly in no particular order. Chetan, what's your take on testing and testing trends over the next 12 months?
I see three key trends, and when I will talk about these trends, I will also try to give specific indicators of why I believe that these trends will see a uprise in 2022. So, and for future as well. So the first trend that comes to mind is around the low code or the no code piece, where we see a lot of traction, and there's specific reason for it. So nowadays, companies want to keep up with the faster release life cycles and ever-changing product life cycle. But at the same time, these companies don't want to spend too much time on automation, and nor they have the expertise to do that automation. So I see that this is what is going to drive as the first reason why I believe that low code or no code piece could be very handy here. So this technically takes automation beyond the testers and developers, which is currently there in the traditional forms of automation. And secondly, no matter what, big companies, large and mostly large companies, they still have their lot of in-house development environments, and most of their backend systems are currently built using low-code platforms like Salesforce, Oracle, Appians of the world, right? But at the same time, these are all mission-critical applications, by the way, right? And some parts of it need extensive or plethora of functional knowledge, which is more available with the business testers who have no idea about test automation or in general automation. And that is where I believe that this is an area where if we could implement it, then it will democratize the process of test automation and not limiting test automation to just a handful of automation experts or specialists. It will take it beyond that tester and the developer life cycle. And finally, if you look back at the data, right, I was looking at data and I tried to do a word cloud and looking at some of the requirements for testing professionals across all the companies, and I tried to do a word cloud. And what came out was that automation as a skill set, or test automation as a skill set, was quite relevant in the current demand. And key indicator, when I say key indicator is there a business viability of such a thing? Is there a business viability of doing a low-code platform? And the way I check is if the companies are investing their valuable money in building these platforms, then that's an indicator of what the trend is coming to be. And I think the biggest indicator there is the acquisition of Atomic IQ by a Sauce Lab. Sauce Lab is quite a big company when it comes to testing, and they acquired Atomic IQ in 2021, which is a great indicator that this may be an upcoming trend. Now, what's the second trend? So second trend when I see is quite common. It's artificial intelligence and machine learning. But just to be clear, it is not it should not be seen as a replacement for any one of us. It's the combination of we as a person and the computer algorithms working together to develop best-in-class automation solutions. So that's the way I see it. Now, this automation, if we can use AI and ML, which is currently being used in various shapes and sizes, it will help to generate more reliable test cases, test scripts, test reports, and test data. The predictive modeling ability of these technologies will help in finding product issues quite quickly and finding areas which have not been tested in the most optimized fashion, particularly helpful in layered system or complex workflows and more with the systems which integrate with third party. Why I believe that this is a trend for the future, because of 3 or 4 key things that I see track as a business movement. So if you think about AI in terms of, there could be multiple use cases. So for example, AI with image recognition and visual APIs, you will see a lot of tools, but Apply tool is investing quite a lot in that space, and that's a key indicator of why this area is going to pick up. Now, if you think about natural language processing, and that's the second area where AI could be used quite nicely. So you think about another company, which is TestRigger. They are doing it quite nicely with natural language processing. Now, the last one of the AI is the fragile test cases, and that is how you stabilize the elements within the automation and UI based. And that's every tool, I believe, has some kind of a roadmap or a strategic direction to address those fragility in the automated pipeline. And that is where AI is, you name it, whether it's Mabel, whether it was Micro Focus, whether it was erstwhile HP, everything is there. Now, the third and the last trend, which I see is quite relevant, is testing of microservices. And I believe that this will continue to introduce new testing patterns and mindsets. So as we talk about API first and more focused testing of domain services, so I believe that API testing is going to be a key differentiator going forward. Now, to add my claims with evidence, all I can say is look at Postman. Postman is one of the commonly used API testing tools. So they received a Series C funding of $225 million last year. And within a year, they have moved from 2 billion company to 5.6 billion USD valuation, right? So that's the amount of businesses they are generating. So that's what I believe are the key trends from my viewpoint, Colin. I hope it was not too long, but
no, it's fine. It's great information. I love the phrase democratize testing, democratize test automation. That is something we're going to come back to explore. I've taken notes and I put a big square around that one, so we'll pick that one up. Rajesh, your thoughts, testing, the next 12 month testing trends.
Right. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, everybody. According to me, I think one thing that's on top of everybody's mind today is what's happening around in the world, right? In terms of all these threats of war and all the unrest, social unrest that's around. That has actually created a lot of chatter in the technology landscape, where I think pretty much every CTO of every organization is actually sleepless, if I'm not exaggerating it, in terms of the ability to keep their environments or their ecosystem secure, right? I think every CTO today talks about how can they ensure that their businesses are secure, right? So I think with all the ransomware attacks that have increased, with all that's happening around the world, security is a key relevant item across the industry. And needless to say, the need to have strong security assurance for your businesses is of paramount importance, according to me. And the assurance that the quality engineers can give in terms of how the overall application landscape in any organization is secure goes a long way in justifying anything that is being spent on in terms of security, because they need to have chaos testing, right? The ability to do testing with unprecedented scenarios, right? And the need to have simulations of DDoS attacks, right? And the vulnerability scans that you may have to run to ensure that your applications are secure come a point of reference. So I think definitely security testing and the advances in security testing are very relevant in the software testing industry, according to me. Number one, I'd say that as a number one, Colin. Number two, the buzzword that's been there for the last few years now is cloud, right? Everybody seems to think cloud is the silver bullet for everything, right? All of problems in the world today. While it's not wrong, I think it's still about it's a double-edged sword unless you know how to yield it, right? And how to wield it. So I think the we've seen every industry, every CTO or every IT organization dabble around with cloud, but then figure out that it is very costly to maintain and not efficiently run with it, right? I think we've seen many places where they kind of have felt, yes, cloud is great for auto scale and other things, but I'm still not ready to optimize it. I don't know how to optimize it. I think that's a very big point in every CTO's agenda, right? So in that context, I believe this is I'm probably coining this term this way, but cloud assurance is what I call it, right? So what I mean is, while anything in cloud, if you know, is completely structured with scripts, right? You can control everything and anything in cloud with scripts, right? So automated scripts are the name game there. So how can we ensure cloud spends are kept optimal, right? While I know each of these major cloud environments provide their own consoles and their own ways and means to optimize and maintain your cloud spends, but the focus on having cloud validations done via automated scripts and ensuring that you kind of maintain a rule engine to kind of keep your cloud spends optimal is something that can be explored with automation, according to me, scripted automation scripts, right? So I think focusing organizations, if they can get their automation testers to apply their mind on cloud and validating the cloud setups, that goes a long way in keeping their spends optimal rather than having to buy expensive solutions to kind of do that. As there are many solutions again in the market that can help optimize cloud spend, but I believe automation testers can actually go a long way in helping do that as a point of offering, and also make themselves more relevant in the cloud context. Call it. That's number two. Last, but I'll just leave it to this. Again, in staying around with the swag that is cloud today, how automation testers or even the entire how one can adopt and kind of get onto the DevOps train is a prerequisite. I would say it's not a big trend that's coming, it's already there, but I think the ability to get your automation scripts completely onto the pipelines, right? And more importantly, how can you ensure that you can fully leverage cloud, right, in terms of auto scale, in terms of containerization, and ensuring that the automation or the validation function is in itself managed effectively and efficiently on the cloud rather than it being an afterthought, right? I believe the advances that the industry can make in terms of completely adopting DevOps in their life cycle and getting onto much more nuanced topics in DevOps, like getting your automation scripts completely onto DevOps train, onto containerizations, right, and onto have what do you call the auto scale and leveraging cloud functions effectively is also a big trend that I see that's shaping up already, Colin.
Roger, thank you very much. Really interesting. I'm going to expand on a few of those points. A lot of feedback here. So I'm going to expand on a few of those points. So Roger talked about security. Now, I've been at talks before where I've essentially asked almost like a mini poll in a talk, where I've asked people to raise their hands, and I said, right, how many of you work for a regulated company, a company subject to regulation? And of course, everybody who works for a bank puts their hand up straight away because, God, it's PCI, it's FCA, it's XYZ, it's ABC, you know. But there are people in the room that do not put their hands up. But I'm like, well, hang on a minute. If you're in Europe or you trade and use data in Europe, you're subject to GDPR. That's regulation. If you're in the UK, you have the Equality Act. That's regulation. If you're in any country in the world, you have regulation. So every company is a regulated company. And that's something I think we will see as a change in ethos and mindset within companies, within software testing departments over the next few months. So essentially, that they realize that every single company, without exception, is a regulated company. Obviously, understanding which regulations apply is hard, is tricky, is really important to get right to avoid legal ramifications. But every company is a regulated company. So that takes us on to security, which Rajesh was talking about. Because of that, if every company is a regulated company, and regulation at some point or other almost always talks about security, it's security of your data, security of your customers, security of your product, security of your pipeline, security of your employees, security of X, Y, Z, then security becomes a mandatory part of every single test team on the planet in every single company. So I think that is a trend we will see rapidly being adopted, that security, rather than it being seen as, well, we do functional testing and somebody else thinks about the security, somebody else thinks about the performance, somebody else thinks about, it becomes a central component to the team. Every company is a regulated company. Secondly, I want to mention about test data. So my wonderful panelists talked very eloquently about AI, machine learning, test data. I think there's one thing I want to add into that, which is the bias in test data. There have been quite a few horrendous occasions recently where the color of somebody's skin, the country they come from, their name, their gender, a test data set has adversely treated an individual or a group of people. That's unfair. That should not happen. So clearly, when we're looking at using more AI, more machine learning, more automation, then if we are doing that upon a biased data set, we are clearly going to be biasing the results in favor or against sections of society. I think testers will need to become very aware of this over the next few months. Testers will need to check their data sets, whether they're in-house created or bought off the shelf or open source, whatever. Testers will need to be able to test and verify their data sets to make sure that they are removing bias wherever they find it. And if you're creating a new test data set and it's only your employees and your employees are all located in one country, then by definition, you're creating a biased test data set. So think about creation of that. And then the third one I'll bring up as well is about speed. So we were talking about doing things faster. I'm going to call this lean testing. So testing, I believe, over the next several months, over the following year, there's a bit of a mind shift happening already. I think this will accelerate. Testing will become an enabler of flow. So it will see a reduction and essentially removal in many companies of all these test phases, all these gates. You know, you must finish your component testing before you can start your system. You must finish your system before you can start your acceptance. It's nonsense, yeah? Don't leave acceptance to the end. Do acceptance from day one. So as a result, day one acceptance, the first thing I want to ask if I'm working in testing it is, by what measure of success, by what measure does a customer value this? By what measure will a customer accept this? By what measure do we accept this? If we're talking about security, those imply acceptance criteria. Old V model says you write them at the start and you execute them at the end. No, you write a few of them at the start and you immediately start executing those acceptance criteria. So a move to continuous and day one acceptance and a move away from old-fashioned, stodgy test gates. I can see that happening. So that's my position anyway, and people are welcome to disagree. I want to come back to a couple of things. Oh, before I do, I'm going to repeat. So questions from the audience. If you have any questions, post them in. We'll see those questions and we'll pick those up as we go. But I want to come back to something. I mentioned it earlier because I think it was a brilliant thing that Chetan said. Democratization of test automation, or let's call it democratization of testing. So the implication that the act of testing, the person that can do testing, the person that can have an investment in testing is not just the tester. Why is that important? Why is it, I mean, that's kind of a leading question, I know, but why is it important, do the panelists feel, that we do democratize testing, that we make testers able to do more with less or with different tools, and we make the rest of the business able to do more and to engage better with testing?
Yeah, and when we look back to it, right? So how did the testing started? Maybe 20-25 years back, when testing started through the ages. If you look at how testing progressed, it was the same set of people who were testing against a set of requirements. Technology was testing a solution design, and the business was testing against a functional document, right? And as a result, the knowledge that exists within the technology is very different from the knowledge that exists within the business, and they both can contribute significantly in the testing. But the tools they use to test are widely different. Business, on the other hand, are more towards manual testing, and technology is more focused towards automated pipelines and CI/CD and all the great automations. What if I make automation accessible to everyone so that everyone contributes in the faster release life cycles and everyone contributes in the reduction of time to market? And that is where I believe if we give the power to the hands of everybody involved in the process to test, and it starts from a development, right? So if you give the power to the developer to start writing their unit test cases through a low-code platform where they don't need to use WinRunner, QTP, and all those Seleniums of the world, they just drag and drop and create some kind of a canvas or a whiteboard in which a flow is depicted, and they just check it around. And the same flow moves and scales when we move into business side of the world. So you start the building of a test as a small block from the unit to the functional technology testing to the business testing. And that can happen only when everybody has the same ethos for testing, has the same ability to use the same set of tools. The knowledge may be different. A developer may contribute more from a unit testing perspective. An integration tester may contribute from the underlying plumbing layer, so to say, and the business contributes in the functional knowledge which they have. Right? So that's my take on that.
Absolutely. Priya, I saw you vigorous and nodding your head there. So I hope that was nodding, because of course what he's saying is right. Now go for it. What's your view on that?
Yes, what Chetan says is definitely, I agree with him. While I agree with him in terms of all and everyone have to contribute, my thinking is, how can technology itself play a role in doing all this? You know, yes, there must be a human intervention. I'm not denying that, but there are many mechanisms. You know, can't we take the validation from a requirement spec, or from a code? Why should someone sit and layer a unit test, or why should someone sit and layer a acceptance test? Because from a user pattern analysis, why not I pull that kind of an information? So the thinking is, yes, it has to be democratized, but at the same time, wherever there can be a technology play, I think that's where that autonomous part and integration of all the players will come, is my view.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, because this plays into what I was saying about day one acceptance or continuous acceptance. If the model of acceptance testing is, someone writes an acceptance criteria which they put into the Jira ticket, and 6 months later someone picks that up, well, okay, that doesn't work. But what if they write it into the Jira ticket and then someone immediately automates it? Well, that means there's a translation going on. The intent the person meant of that acceptance criteria, they have had to write in words. Those words may not be written in their first language. Most companies that I've worked in, English is the first language of the company, but curiously, most of the people I work with, English may not be their first language. So we're forcing people to potentially write something in a non-native language, which they tested and has to translate into Selenium or something else. So there's levels of translation, delay, uncertainty, losing the intent. So absolutely, we need our tools to support somebody that says, this is how I know that this will work for me and my company and my employees and my customers, and they can articulate that in a very easy way, in a plain language way that the software automatically picks up on, and then runs that as an acceptance test, and that enables true day one pure acceptance testing. Absolutely.
Colin, I'll take it a little further, Colin. Whether it is structured or unstructured, right? With the kind of AI trainings that we can do, even we can get to the deeper level of understanding these substance. A simple example, when you type on a MS Teams, right? Doesn't it give you an immediate reply? Or a Google, when you type something, doesn't it give an immediate reply what you want to give? The similar way, I think we can go deeper even in testing requirements, specification, and pull out those kind of information. That would be the far vision, I would say.
You're talking about immediate feedback as well then at that point.
Immediate feedback, getting every information, pushing it back to as a defect, or even fixing those defects. I think that's the world we should be looking at.
I think there's an title there, which is we say about immediate feedback. Computers now are ridiculously fast. I mean, we know this, yeah. Your average computer, your average laptop, I've got my Apple Mac here, got my work PC there. These things are lightning fast compared to what I had even 3 years ago, yeah. So as a result, they can do amazing things, and yet somehow we still manage to write our tests in a way that takes minutes or hours or days to run. And I'm like, crikey, we have kit that is I mean, you know, there's the thing about how the amount of processing power on the Apollo, the moon missions back in the 60s, and how that your average smartphone has 1,000 times more power. Well, it's no longer that. It's your smartphone that has 1,000,000 times more. But we still run these slow tests. We set ourselves up that it takes a long time. Well, I think that requires a thought process. I mean, what do you think? Do you feel we need almost like a mental leap in testing, a mental leap over the next 12 months, which says we actually have fast computers, let us start using them like fast computers? Do you think that leap is needed?
Yes, and another point I would like to add here is democratizing testing. One great advantage with that is people who understand the business can actually do the tests, which is I mean, they can do the automated test. I think that's the name given. I mean, people who understand the business have always done the validations centuries on, but I think the point is we giving the power of automated tests to people who actually understand the business and not bring in somebody with pure expertise or siloed expertise on technology to be able to build those automation scripts, and taking that further with autonomous, as Priya was mentioning, is the greatest advantage of autonomous or even democratized testing, because we put the validation back at the center and not the technology, right? I think that's the best part of all of this, and I think it also ties very well with the citizen developer model, right, where you get people who are non-tech folks to be able to deliver on business relevant outputs. So I think that is where it helps, and I think there is no doubt. I think I completely agree with both Priya and Chetan in this point of, unless the automation is automated, you will not get true value of this being a value center rather than a cost center. It will always be, I mean, already testing is federated, decentralized. People are worried about testing existing in a few years. While I don't worry, I know testing as a practice, as a function, will always exist. Testers may cease to exist at some point. Obviously, they're all morphing into different avatars as we speak today. But I think the point is how, unless we get to automated automation, which is what no-code platforms, what Chetan mentioned, or even the autonomous solutions that Priya mentions are a reality, we'll not get there. And that's where I feel is the place where the industry is headed to very fast, the way I see it, Colin.
So there's a lovely use case that you can think of that I've seen once in my career over the last few years, and it's just amazing. So it's imagine I'm a salesperson and I'm about to sign a deal with a client for £1 million to sell them some software, and my brain suddenly goes, does the software do that thing I'm about to sell? Wouldn't it be lovely if the salesperson can click a few buttons or drag a few boxes, hit go, and it comes back with thumbs up? Yes, you can sell that deal. It satisfies that need. No need to talk with a developer or tester or anybody else. And of course, if it does not satisfy that need, that's a valid change request. Maybe this is something we want to invest in as a business. There's cost revenue benefit for doing so. So a good mature conversation can then happen. This separation, this almost like keeping the business, I mean, obviously testers are part of the business, but keeping the business away from testing, because testing is the job of testers and developers. I'm really pleased that we now say that testing is the job of testers and developers. It used to be just the job of testers. So we've come a long way, but why is testing, why is quality, why is learning and feedback and improving? That should be the responsibility of every single person involved in that value chain, not just a specific engineering department. So it's really, really good, valuable points. Let's have a quick look here. Okay, so yeah, I'm struggling to see any questions coming up. Alec, if you're listening in, can you have a figure out what's going on with the questions? Nothing is appearing on my screen.
Sure, I'll check that out.
Yeah, cheers, thank you. Okay, so let's draw on something else that came up in this. Yeah. Okay, so there is a problem though. So we're talking about this wonderful panacea, this amazing future world where anyone can write a test and in some straightforward language or drag and drop or whatever it may be, some beautiful form, draw a diagram. I would love it if people could draw stick people, draw lines from stick people, and the software understands what to do, because then those people who think in a visual way would also be able to contribute. But anyway, The problem, though, that can occur is if everybody can write a test and the tests are going into our continuous integration, continuous this, that, and the other, surely that just slows everything down. And it also means we can be diverted from what is valuable to thousands and thousands of items of minutiae. So the test suite takes a long time. The test department, the dev department, all these working together, DevOps, etc. It becomes very hard. So how do we control for that? Or do we need to control for that? What do we do about that problem where we could end up with too much being tested and therefore slowing things down? How can we deal with that, even with fast computers?
So I think it is important to define the testing layers and which layer is going to cover what, so that there are no overlapping test cases. So overlapping test cases is a lot of technical debt that gets induced in a test life cycle. Not just because you tend to test one thing twice, it is not climate efficient. And that is which I'll come to a trend maybe next year when we'll talk about green testing. So that is what I see is a real problem that gets induced because of this overlapping. So that is why overlapping isn't a great thing. We should be able to define the boundaries as to what gets tested at which phase, and that is where we will be able to reduce those thousands of test cases for just hundreds of microservices. And
Chetan, I'm going to interrupt with a question here. If we are defining boundaries, we're putting governing constraints in place. It says this belongs here, this does not belong there. Are we not then removing that democratization we just talked about? Are we not in danger of turning around to that salesperson that I just mentioned and saying, no, you cannot do that test because that does not go here and this goes here? Surely we want people involved in the process. So how do we balance these two needs? How do we balance over the next 12 months? Because this is going to become a big issue. Low code, no code, etc. is going to make it easier for anybody to write a test. That is going to mean a lot more tests. How do we cope with that within our industry? Thousands and thousands of random tests appearing from nowhere. We will not be able to stop that from happening. How are we going to control for that? How are we going to deal with that?
Yeah, so the best example I can think about is a democratic system of a country. Now, what we think is that there are departments or there are different set of ministers doing specific things. Not everybody is getting into the financial planning, but coming back to the topic, here the point is that if somebody is doing integration testing, right, make sure they do only integration testing. They don't develop the UI level test cases. If the business testers are doing a UI level testing, then make sure that the technology is not spending time on that UI based testing. And the current fallacy is that both the technology and the business both are doing UI testing, right? And as a result, the integration testing gets pushed to the left on the developer side, and that's where it's not happening. So you just have to rejig or reorganize the way the tests happen, and that is what the boundaries. These tools will enable to do that, but again, the boundaries have to be self-defined.
Sure. Priya, what do you think?
I have a different view, Colin. For me, when it is democratized and anybody can log an issue on at any level, let it be a unit level, integration level, anyone can find an issue. It doesn't matter. When it comes to the job descriptions, I am seeing this, if it is everything automated, right? Only the exploratory testing will be left to the people, and that anybody can do. And that is better. And with the kind of agile and DevOps and quick releases, unless our core main business flows are intact and some let me say level 4 or serve 3 kind of an issue comes up, people are now okay to fix it in the next sprint itself, which is going to be within the next 3 months, right? That attitude of what is an acceptable level of defect has come into the industry. But at the same time, we cannot restrict people to, not find certain issues at a different level. I feel that should be open and everyone can find an issue, and that should go into an iterative mode, as I said, a feedback loop, so that, for example, I find a boundary value issue in one of the area. then to check whether all my fields related to that do not have that kind of an issue should be an immediate auto trigger kind of a thing. That is the way that industry should go, rather than boxing it with people. Then otherwise you will still have the same community. We wouldn't have been in a SDET situation, what we are in currently. Today, the testers are already embedded within the development team, and developers have started doing integration tests too. So that compartment is gone, is what I feel.
Yeah, and moreover, one more point I'd like to add here is we always say this is a famous adage in testing, right? You can never test enough, right? So which is actually what is getting chipped off with everybody actually test, right? I mean, at every level, if people still build scripts, and moreover, I think the kind of no code or like say autonomous QA solutions that are there kind of create a right structure for your tests as well, right? Even if you have all your DevOps pipeline enabled, as many tests getting onto the pipeline still fundamentally help validate the system under review, right? So I think you can never test enough, right? You can always accommodate all of these things, and with unless you are sitting on cloud and then running thousands and thousands of irrelevant tests, right? I think you're still I think everybody can test, and as much as testing that can help achieve the business outcomes with the right kind of experience and right kind of quality that businesses need, I think should be welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so here's a couple of things, right, about this that are coming in. Okay, I love, Priya, what you just said there. Exploratory testing, sorry, I'm having to look down so I can read from my notes. Exploratory testing left to the people. Okay, yeah, that's true democracy, absolutely, because those people, whoever they are, will pick the things of value that they want to be interested in. So if I'm interested in button A or button B, well, if I want to click button A, that's my exploratory testing because that's the button I am interested in a simplistic term. Rajesh, when you said you can never have enough testing, you can never get enough test enough, absolutely. But this leads on to something very interesting. We've got some questions coming in. I'm going to pull these straight up, and two questions, and I'm going to put them together because I think there is a nice overlap. So if we're having exploratory testing done by the people, if we're saying everything's going to be automated, whether or not it's cloud, whether or not it's low code, no code, but everything's automated, AI and machine learning coming into play. So two questions: will testers be replaced with AI and machine learning? And will a purely manual tester still have a job in 1 to 2 years' time?
I'll try and go first, right? I mean, AI replacing humans has always been the point of contention, not just in testing, across the industry, right? Across every walk of life. But I think AI coming into testing is actually an enabler, the way I see it, because there are deep pockets of efficiency that AI can actually bring in, like say predicting the defect trends, doing triaging, right, or even predicting the defect. I mean, who's the developer who's more defect prone, right? There are many ways and means that you can apply AI in testing. I mean, I call that AI for QA, right, rather than QA for AI. So there are a variety of ways and means where AI can actually be an enabler, and I think we are still very far away. I mean, when we come to the point of singularity, probably that's when anybody should be worried about AI taking over humans. But I think we are very far away from there, according to me. The Avengers universe is probably still a fantasy, right? I think in that context, I still feel AI cannot take over testers. I think it's just a matter of how AI can actually be enabling testing to be much more effective is the way I'd put it, Colin.
Colin, for me, I put it in different ways. Okay, one, yes, this advancement on the technology is going to happen. People have to learn a lot of new technologies, so there is no doubt about it. Early days we had test data entry as one of the big things. Today, if you see, AI training is something which is a big thing, right? And people are required even to do that job. From a testing standpoint, tester has many roles to play. They can get into business side, they can get into when for example, today we are talking about AI. I don't know, probably within the next 2 years we'll be talking in the same forum with metaverse, right? And someone has to test the metaverse, right? And to catch up on automation in metaverse is going to take some more time. So till then, the tester has another kind of things to go and test. So today we are testing AI. Tomorrow we will test metaverse. Tomorrow we will test something else. But the testing and that course, that task would not go away. But what are you going to test on? What kind of skill you have to upgrade to test on will definitely vary. And of course, the kind of tester, we have a various venue to play within this entire industry, because the industry is wide, vast, and the way you shape up your career, is all about how you skill yourself. You can't stay back old and say that, I will be only a manual tester. You can, but you have to then learn that kind of technology to be a manual tester in that area.
Totally. So that's a really important point. So the answer to the question, will manual testers still exist in 1 to 2 years' time? Yes, but not in the form they are today. So if anyone's listening to this, or you've got any colleagues and their job is to literally sit there and press button 1, then press button 2, then press button 3 and check the value, and then press button 1 and then 2 and then 3 and check the value. If they're a pure manual tester doing that, their job has already gone. They just do not know it. That job does not exist today. They just have not realized that. Their company has not realized that. Their team has not realized that. However, manual testing, as in using the brain, let's think about it. This is what we're really talking about, is a computer, until we have true AI, a computer is very much based on a series of logical events. There's inputs, there's actions, there's outputs fundamentally, the whole OR gates, NOR gates, AND gates, etc. There's all this stuff. However, if I'm a pure manual tester, I've still got a brain. I've got a brain that will outstrip that computer any day. It can do calculations a gazillion times, a million times, a billion times better than I can, yet I can still think better. And a good example is just hold up a pen. I can rotate this pen from any angle. I can even hide the pen. I still know the pen is there. A computer struggles with that concept. Computer vision is just starting to get this idea. If I hide the pen and I move my hand, I know the pen is still there. A lot of computer vision will break at that point. It will not realize the pen has moved, but it's hidden. And it's because we have abstract thought. So manual testers will exist to provide that abstract thought that computers struggle with. Roll forward a number of years. If, and I think it's if at the moment, none of us know for certain, if AI really can start to get some basic degrees of abstract thought, then we have to revisit that question. But that, I think, is way off into the future. That's way beyond 1 to 2 years' time, to get that abstract thought concept. So manual testers absolutely will exist, but you will not be pressing button 1, button 2, button 3. If you're doing that today, you need to find something else to do very quickly. Your job has already gone, essentially. But there's lots for you to do. How about marshalling and gathering the people to do that exploratory testing? Again, exploratory testing left to the people, but how do they do it? How do they know what a reasonable test is? Go be the person that is a champion of exploratory testing. That's a good use of a manual tester.
Yeah, and I'll just take 10 seconds to say this, that manual testers are still revered because at the point where you talk business context, right? I think specializing in a business domain or an industry vertical or in a subject matter, right, is of real relevance today. I think people with the right kind of subject matter expertise are still revered. So I think manual testers, if you really still are adamant, you'll only stay, you'll not touch technology. I think the only way is to go deep vertically and specialize in the domain or in the business industry that you are with. Like, for example, you can be a mortgage functional expert, right? Or you can be a healthcare expert, right? So I think staying deeper vertical probably is the only way you can still survive the storm that's around, in case you're not prepared for anything other than just being manual, right? So that's one way I'd put it, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Now I'm going to come back to the test automation bit here, because that seems to be the flavor of the day, which is absolutely fine. There's a really good question coming here. So I'm going to jump straight to this question because it's absolutely relevant. Can we please elaborate on how latest trends can deal with maintenance of test automation? Somebody's also asked for what are the best automation tools for next year and why. My answer to that is, well, what is your context? Because your context dictates what a good tool is. So it's hard to answer that part of the question. But how can we, so can we elaborate on the latest trends to deal with the maintenance of test automation? Because maintenance historically has been horrendous. Record and playback was awful. So how can we improve upon maintenance of automation?
So I think when it comes to...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you go first. You go first this time, Priya.
Yeah.
I go first, then I will brand my own product, Assurance, because yes, testing and maintenance automation has always been a problem. I mean, if you really go back and look at our percentage with this, all the sprint and DevOps and Agile coming in, the automation has become more or less, I would say, than growing bigger because of, maintaining that speed to maintain the automation script. So the way it will go for me, or what we have developed ourselves in Ignio AI Assurance, is the self-healing capability. Once you have a change in the screen or change in the business flow, if the product or a tool can identify that and make remediation to all the test cases and the automation script, including the data, that is the way it will go, is my strong belief, because there are proof points that it can happen. Yeah,
so automatic maintenance for automatic tests. So my example, again, I know I've got my video pen, so I hide the pen is no longer there, the pen is here, and I reveal the pen. Many automation scripts will break because the pen is supposed to be over here. And automatic maintenance would say, no, the pen has moved. It's still the pen, it's still there,
It's
so
still
that's
there,
automatic.
and if the shape and the size is all the same, even if a shape and a size change, you have to identify the shape changed.
I've got a different pen, it's still the pen. If the test is not of the pen, if the test is of what the pen does, well, the question is, does it write? So the test case is, can my pen write? That's the automatic test. It does not matter whether it's this pen or that pen. Can ink come out? Can it write? So yeah, really, really good point. Automatic maintenance of tests is something we strongly and desperately need. There are basic ways of doing that in the past. Old school ways of doing that, of using if it's a website and using Selenium, using the ID, try to use the ID before you use the CSS, try to use the CSS before, and then try to avoid the XPath, because the XPath location always breaks very quickly. So we know this is a principle, but actually, what if something doesn't have an ID, or what if the ID is dynamic? Many cloud solutions now, the elements that they present to the user, many commercial off-the-shelf systems, low-code things like Salesforce, every single ID is dynamic all the time. So you have to think of different ways to doing things, for automatic maintenance. Really, really good point. Anyone else? Rajesh or Chetan, do you have thoughts on that? So how are we going to deal with maintenance of testing automation?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead. You were trying to say something.
What Priya said absolutely makes sense. Ignio AI provides that self-healing ability because of the underlying AI algorithms, and most of the tools in the market currently does that, where they are able to look at fragility of the test case and address that. But I think so that is, of course, the tools are one part of the chain. The frameworks that we had so far were more of technical frameworks, where you write components based on the controls on the web page or on an application, right? And I think if you could think about that framework to a slightly different form, which is model-based testing, and you work through a business model or a business keyword rather than a technical keyword, then your maintenance effort will get down considerably lower on the side, and at the same time your reuse will increase. So that's my take on that.
I love that, business keywords, absolutely. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, and I'm no doubt going to be asked by Alec and Co to keep roughly to time. So I'm just going to ask, given that we've got only 3 or 4 minutes left, in 1 minute or less, and I mean 1 minute or less, what's the key thing, the number one thing that you hope for over the next 12 months? So it might be not a trend that you definitely see is going to happen, but what do you hope is going to happen over the next 12 months? Let's start with Rajesh.
So I think in-sprint automation has always been a mirage that people have been wanting to achieve, right? I mean, that's the true sense of getting in alignment with the pace at which you want your go-to-market software to be delivered, right? So I think in-sprint automation is with traditional techniques is always a challenge. That's where n-1, n-2 are the maximum you can get to, right? I think with all that we speak about in terms of no-code solutions or self-healing solutions, autonomous or any, I mean, there are a variety of tools, right? I think the point is getting to more and more in-sprint makes you very much closer to the business relevance of the software under test, right? And then the quality also gets there, right? I think in my view, that's going to become a thing of the past by the time we come back to this next year, probably, where in-sprint is going to be a reality. I think that's where I feel if I have to just name one, that will probably be the one.
Fair enough. Priya, what about you? What's the one thing over the next 12 months?
For me, it is about balancing the time, cost, quality in terms of ensuring that testing right within the time so that we accomplish time to market, the faster time to market or a better quality, of the business application. So this balancing these three with the right amount of tools, right amount of technology is going to play an important role for any business, because testing is a very key phase in this entire software life cycle. And if we are able to do that balance at the appropriate time, I think we will be, that's where the industry will go.
Fantastic. And lastly, Chetan, you, 1 minute or less, what do you think for the next 12 months?
So my favorite is green testing, and we have to explore the ways to write energy efficient test cases so that I don't have to sit in 49 degrees temperature in Delhi, India. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen, and that will happen for sure.
Fair play. Absolutely. There you go. Alec, welcome back to you. So many thanks to my panelists, Priya, Rajesh and Chetan. Thank you so much for an excellent conversation. Software testing trends in 2022 and a bit into 2023 and beyond. Alec, over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's been a fantastic session. I was just thinking it would be really interesting to do this again in a year and kind of see where we are compared with this point in time. But no, thank you. It's been fantastic. So a massive thank you to all our panelists, also to the audience. It's been really good to have so many questions and to see so many people attending today. So thank you very much indeed. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.